It was a cold, misty night in the small town of Ravenswood. Lydia clutched her scarf tightly around her neck, standing at the bus stop by the edge of the forest. The last bus of the night was running late, as usual. She checked her phone, 11:45 p.m. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows on the empty road. The air felt heavy, carrying an odd silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. She glanced at the dimly lit schedule board. The bus should have arrived 10 minutes ago. There was no one else around, just her and the deep, dark woods. Then she noticed something, a figure standing at the far end of the bus stop, partially obscured by the shadows. Lydia hadn't seen anyone approach. Her heart skipped a beat as she strained her eyes. The figure didn't move. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. No answer. The figure remained still, its face hidden in darkness. Lydia decided to ignore it, convincing herself it was just someone waiting like her. She scrolled through her phone for distraction, but her connection was gone. Typical. With no signal, she couldn't even call a cab. The soft crunch of footsteps on gravel snapped her attention back. The figure was moving now, slow, deliberate steps toward her. Lydia's breath quickened. "Can I help you?" she asked, forcing her voice to sound firm. The figure stepped into the light. It was a man, pale and gaunt, wearing an old-fashioned suit. His eyes, hollow and sunken, locked onto hers. A chill ran down her spine. "The bus isn't coming," he said in a flat, monotonous tone. "What?" Lydia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The bus hasn't come here in years," he continued, his lips curling into a faint, unsettling smile. "That's not true," Lydia stammered. "I checked the schedule. It's just running late." The man chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You're at the wrong stop. This stop is for them." He gestured toward the woods. Lydia turned to look, and her heart dropped. Emerging from the trees were more figures, pale and silent, their empty eyes fixed on her. Some looked like children, others adults, but all of them bore an eerie, unnatural stillness. She stepped back, her legs trembling. What do you mean?" The man's smile widened, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. "You've been standing here for a long time, haven't you? Longer than you think." Panic set in. Lydia pulled out her phone again, but the screen displayed nothing. No time, no apps, just static. She turned to run, but the road was gone. The bus stop now stood in the middle of a dense, misty forest. Shadows loomed everywhere. The pale figures began to close in, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Lydia screamed and turned to the man. "Please let me go," she begged. His expression softened, almost sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Lydia, this isn't the way out." Before she could respond, the figures surrounded her. Their cold hands grabbed her, pulling her into the shadows. Her screams echoed through the trees, then faded into silence. The next morning, a new commuter arrived at the bus stop. He noticed an old, weathered sign barely visible under the grime. Out of service since 1985. Shrugging it off, he decided to wait for the bus. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a pale figure emerged from the woods watching him. The pale man lingered near the edge of the woods, his hollow eyes watching the new commuter. A young man in his early 20s with earbuds in, oblivious to the eerie surroundings. The commuter swayed slightly to the beat of his music, glancing down the road every so often, clearly impatient for a bus that would never come. The man in the old-fashioned suit stepped forward, his shoes making no sound on the gravel. The young man, feeling a sudden chill, pulled out an earbud and looked around. "Hey, man," he said, noticing the figure. "You waiting for the bus too?" The pale man smiled faintly. "Something like that." The young man squinted, uneasy. "You all right? You look kinda pale." "I've been here a long time," the man replied cryptically. "And you'll be here too, soon enough." The young man frowned, his instincts finally prickling with alarm. What's that supposed to mean? Before the man could answer, a faint rustling came from the woods. Shadows began to shift unnaturally, figures emerging from the trees just as they had the night before. The young man turned, his breath hitching. The figures, men, women, and children, had blank, lifeless expressions and moved with an eerie, synchronized grace. "Hey, what's going on?" the young man shouted, backing toward the road. The pale man stepped closer, his face a mask of calm. "You waited too long. The bus hasn't come here in decades, and now you're part of this place." "No, that's insane," the young man yelled, turning to run. But the road behind him was gone. replaced by the dense, suffocating mist of the forest. His heart pounded as the pale figures closed in, their cold, outstretched hands reaching for him. He turned back to the pale man, desperation in his eyes. "Help me, please." The man tilted his head slightly, as if in pity. "I can't. You see, this stop, it's theirs." The figures swarmed him, their icy touch draining the warmth from his body. He screamed, his voice echoing into the darkness, before it faded into silence. The bus stop stood still, as if nothing had happened. The woods returned to their usual quiet, save for the faint sound of a distant engine. Moments later, a sleek modern bus pulled up. The door creaked open, but there was no one to board. The driver glanced around, shivered, and quickly shut the door. The bus rolled on, leaving the stop behind. The pale man watched, his hollow gaze unblinking. Then he turned and disappeared into the woods, leaving the bus stop ready for its next victim.